Hi, everybody. So I'm getting some confusion when I'm turning in the 4.05 simple news story. Um, there are some assignments that are way off base. So I want to clarify a couple things and show you some student examples. Student names are in on these, but I'm going to kind of go through a couple of different steps of what not to do and kind of what's halfway okay, but what we're missing, and then what is actually pretty much what your assignment should look like when you hand it in for at least 4.05. So the first student, what they decided to do was write about Kings Island. And they decided to write about Orion to the new roller coaster. So this student more than likely lives in the Cincinnati area because they're writing about something local to them, was what you were supposed to do. So which is fine. So specifically what I want to touch on are the interviews. So this student decided to put in two interviews. One was from Don Helbig, and the other one was from um, Mike Coots. So if you notice, Mike Coots is the vice president of the park, and Don Helbig is the digital marketing manager. For this student to actually know those people, the likelihood of that is not very big. For them to find an article that they were interviewed in would be pretty easy, right? So that automatically becomes non-human resource because it's research that the student has done. So the mistake here is that the student is not actually interviewing anyone that they know personally, or they have not set up an actual interview with someone. So for this assignment, this student could have interviewed their mom, their dad, their best friend, anyone who has some type of an interest in Orion Kings Island. It would have made sense for them to interview them, right? So on top of that, back on that discussion board assignment, where you guys were working in groups, you developed those 10 questions to help with that interview process. What were good interview questions, things like that. So that's when you're putting all of this into practice. So when you find someone to interview, no matter if it's your little sister, your big brother, whoever it is, you're still going to make a list of interview questions and you're going to ask them. Will you use all of those questions in this article? Probably not. Will you use a couple of their answers? Yes, right? So that's what I wanted to point out here. So you specifically are writing your article from scratch. You're not pulling an article off of the website. You're not looking at an article from a newspaper and rewriting it. You are taking it. So this student, if they wanted to write about Orion, they were writing this article from scratch. So it could have been talking about the longest, fastest roller coaster in the world, but then it could have talked about, well, what does everyone else think about this roller coaster? Are they excited to ride it? Are they scared? Whatever take they want to have on that article, that's up to them. So you're not copying someone else, you're coming up with your own original work, okay? And I'm going to emphasize that this specific article will be transformed later on, and I'm going to kind of show you a little bit of how that's going to happen here in a second. So this student decided to write about a local band in their area, which is fantastic. They did a great job. Um, they did ask interview questions of the band members. The point here that I want to make is after catching up with alt rock band, I was able to talk with the longest standing member. So they were talking with them. They talked a little bit about that information. The big mistake that the student is making here is they're saying I. In any type of article like this, unless you're writing some type of like personal editorial type thing, any type of article, you always write in third person. You never put I into a news article, okay? So you have to write it like kind of almost like you're writing an essay a little bit when you have to have that formal writing. So it has to be in third person. It cannot be in first person, all right? So the last article that I want to show you is kind of what to do. So this student decided to write about a cat that went missing and how it affected someone. So they did an interview with this person. The person, they're using quotes for the interview. They're talking a little bit about what happened. They're using a little bit more quotes for this person. So the one thing I have not asked you guys to do yet is to add pictures. So this, you do not have to do that. We're doing that later. So you have a discussion board assignment that's coming up. In your discussion board assignment, you're being asked to start adding pictures and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to do that for 4.05. This student already went ahead, jumped on it and did that, okay? So the other thing that you have not been asked to do yet is to add any type of links in. That is going to be something that you are going to be asked to do later on down the road. This student went ahead and added links to their article, which is fine. They're not going to get any more credit for it than if they didn't, but eventually you will be asked to do that. Okay, so this student's article has 2 interviews, which is what you're required to do. It has non-human resource, and it has to do with their personal area, and they wrote it from scratch. They didn't copy it from anyone else. So those are the things that I'm really looking for, and I'm seeing a lot of those articles. You're just making them way more difficult than they need to be. You don't need to take an article. So if you want to write about how the coronavirus is affecting your area or your school, then you don't look for an article about that. You write that from scratch. Find someone to interview, find 2 people to interview, and then write about it, and then add in some of those statistics and look for those statistics later. I don't want you copying any article. So that's not the purpose of this. You are the journalist. So if I was to turn in, if you were to turn in some of these to me as being your editor and I'm seeing that you're copying them, we looked at some of these earlier where those are big no-nos because you're plagiarizing or you're not having your own original ideas. So just remember, it's your own original work. You have to interview someone that you know unless you're setting up an interview with a stranger and then you're still talking to them, asking them interview questions. You're not pulling interviews that someone else did. At that point, if you're looking at an interview that someone else did, that becomes research and it becomes non-human research, okay? So I hope that clarifies for some of you. Many of you, I am asking you to resubmit. So if you would like to go ahead and resubmit before I grade, that's fine. Or if you're like, oh gosh, I need to completely redo this, then redo it. All right. If you have questions, please let me know.